Here we go.
What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2020, Best Podcast News Award winner, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I also co-host and co-produce the only online show in the world for dads and fathers that's sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. And being part of that collaboration in 2022 and 2021, reached out directly and indirectly to over 100,000 fathers around the world. So as always, just like to say, you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, a solution for someone's problem. We are here on Black Canada Talking, broadcasting live on July 16th. We're in the middle of summer in this part of the world, and it's hot, hazy, and humid. But it seems like in a lot of places in North America, it's hot, hazy, and humid. So we're bringing heat today also. So before we get started, a little housekeeping rules. First of all, if you are up to it, please like the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube. So like it on YouTube and hit the notification button. We're up to we're getting close to 1,200 subscribers. At the beginning of this year, we hit 1,000. Now we've hit 200 the first half of the year. It took a long time to get to the 1,000. But it's taking less time to grow from there. So appreciate your support. Also like the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook and YouTube. Also, if you'd like to advertise your business or service on the platform, please contact me at dr.vibe@thedrvibeshow.com. So we're here talking about Black Canada Talking. I want to just give you a little rundown. Black Canada Talking is a live online event that provides Black Canadians the opportunity to give their POVs and takes about things that are of importance to them, and I think globally too. And we also highlight people who have great things to say, predominantly who are in Canada. And one of the people I love having on a regular basis, and I would say he's built a following on this platform, is Cesar Ndema-Moussa, and we have him back today. Always have a pleasure to have him on. How are you, my brother?
I'm very good, Dr. Vibe. I'm very good, everybody. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope you are well, and everybody's well, safe, and sound where they are.
Absolutely. I want to shout out one of our favorite people, Leslie McEwen from the Ottawa area. Says, good evening, Dr. Vibe and fellow viewers. And Doc, she is a great supporter and appreciate the hard work she's doing, especially when it comes to Black Canadians and mental health. She's been a psychotherapist for over 30 years. 30 years serving the Black community. So really excited to have her on. Really excited. Share it out. Cesar is with us for a little bit of time because he's in between things. I knew Cesar when he wasn't a dad, and there's been a transformation. So his time was already squeezed when he wasn't. It's even squeezed more. How is fatherhood, by the way?
Well, when I just asked you before we came on air if I had 30 seconds, you was to do a load of laundry.
Well, I extended it to as long as I possibly could, because that was when you're a dad, those 30 seconds can turn into 45, a minute. You never know what's going to go on in between those things you're wanting to get done.
But, there you go. So I wanted to make sure. Yeah, no, it's good. I'm very happy. Daughter is growing well. It seems like she's 2 in age, but she looks 4 or 5. But sometimes the character makes you think she's 12 years old already. So it's a good experience, and much value to Black fathers, all fathers, of course, but especially Black fathers, despite the stereotypes and everything. Shout out to the Black fathers, but also shout out to the Black mothers of all skin tones, and also all mothers who are helping in the community, whatever the background, who are giving support to the brothers and who are there for the children, notably, and we have to remind this, notably if they are alone, we have to be a stronger community all together, all together.
Well put. Well put. Well, nice way to kick off our conversation piece. And Cesar and I were chatting before he came on, saying, "What are we going to talk about? What are we going to talk about?" And I picked up one conversation topic we'll follow up with after, but he wanted to do this one first. And I think it's a really important conversation topic based on what's going on all over the melanated world. Cesar, the state of Pan-Africanism in 2023. Now, before you go there, I wanted to find out, what is your definition of Pan-Africanism?
That is an excellent question. The classic definition in terms of Pan-Africanism being basically the quest, the truth, the movement of truth and justice for people of African descent, basically Africans and basically descendants of colonization, just as descendants of slavery. So the quest for truth, justice, but also economic solidarity, cultural unity in terms of, like, example, the reappropriation of African art, just as we saw a very good example with our sisters and brothers in Barbados, the rejection of colonization and its legacy, such as the royals of England as the monarchs of Black nations, right? So the coming together of Black people for the solidarity, the economic empowerment, truth about the history, but also justice in terms of social causes, cultural, etc., etc. The leaders behind me are Pan-Africanists, and Pan-Africanism is not a matter of saying I only care about those who either look like me or of my ethnicity. Pan-Africanism is ultimately a consciousness about all other Black people. And my Pan-Africanism, which I call global Pan-Africanism, recognizes the Blackness of even those people that are not seen as Africans, such as Blacks in India, Blacks in Australia, Indigenous Australians, because ultimately the similarities in terms of the oppression, the victimization, but also the fight for dignity are so similar to those in Africa, in the Caribbean, in the Americas.
Okay. Good, thorough definition. I'm going to go through, I want to look at some of the parts that you shared with it. So, there's so many different ways I can go. Let me just go over the thing that comes right off my head. On a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being we're way off when it comes to Pan-Africanism, to 10 that we've got it right on, where would you put that number at the moment?
Before I answer that, if you don't mind, allow me to recap on 2 events that led to my thinking of bringing this topic forward.
Sure.
You received us, now it's about 2 months ago, as we were ahead of going to the United Nations regarding the Permanent Forum for People of African Descent for 1 week in New York. That is one event that led me to bring this topic. And the other one is coming from that event a month ago, June 11, I gave my first international presentation on Black religious trauma. And what leads me these 2 events to talk about the state of Pan-Africanism, and as you're asking me, basically from 0 to 10, where we are right now, there's a growing consciousness, yes. And I mean, the decade of people of African descent is coming to an end, the decade next year, 2024. But also, more and more people, Black people, are becoming aware and speaking more openly regarding some of the harms, the traumas that institutions such as religion is causing to Black people in relation to addressing identity, racism, etc., etc. So from 0 to 10, I would have to say that right now, I'm going to say we're at a 5. And I purposely say 5 in the middle because, unfortunately, the critical mass of us as Black people are still alienated. Alienated, not as a criticism, definitely not an insult, but alienated in terms of the despair to integrate white structures in the world that we live in. And by white, I don't just mean Europe or the Americas. I'm talking white, Europeans, Arabic, I'm talking white Jews, just as I'm talking about white Indians. The vast majority of us are still living under the prism that this is what to aim for. It's still a minority, but a growing minority that is daring, and I really mean daring, to become unapologetically Black, to grow into the Blackness, to seek their history, to ask the questions, to stand up. It's not about being the next Black Panther. It's not about having some type of extremist speech. It's whether it's online or whether it's in person, there is a growing minority of Black people, especially in these coming years where there is an African boom, an African demographic boom coming, but also during which, notably as we've seen since the murder, I could even say assassination of George Floyd, a growth of Black consciousness. So I'm going to say 5 at this moment to that question.
Okay. I wish I had you for 2 hours, but I think this will be an ongoing conversation. One of the first things that hits to my head is how key is economic progress to the state and the future? If we want to get that 5 up to like a 7 or 8, how key is economic, I don't know, freedom, economic movement, economic empowerment to Pan-Africanism in your mind?
It's going to hurt to hear. We live in 2023 where it's fundamental to understand the mismanagement of African nations in terms of how you can have a conflict, a European conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and you have countries in Africa that are going to Ukraine and to Russia to make demands and really to beg so that grains can keep flowing to Africa to feed African populations. Africa that for thousands upon thousands of years, and if I dare to say since the beginning of humanity, never needed another continent to feed itself. Yes, we can talk about slavery, colonization, and globalization, of course, in playing a role in the turning out of things. But it's a fundamental problem. And if I dare to say the 2 economic giants of Africa, South Africa and Nigeria, we can't really talk about Africa rising or the demographic boom and how by 2050 or 2100, 25 to 33% of human beings will be Africans. I didn't even say Black, Africans. And yet we have giants with feet of clay. We have South Africa that has such power cuts that people protest. We have Nigeria, not only with the insecurity due to the Boko Haram and religious extremism, but also poverty leading people to go through oil pipes to try to get oil. And from time to time, there are accidents that kill tens of people at a time. The economic empowerment of African nations go on par with the economic empowerment of Black communities. When your community is seen as weak, socioeconomically, so economically in terms of money and socially in terms of its identity, you become prey to the institutions that will basically not oppress you necessarily simply because you're Black, but because you're weak. Dr. Vibe, I'm sure you remember this notice that had come out from New York City. Now, I believe it's 15 years ago, or maybe a little bit before, in which there was a leaked memo from New York City Police. I believe he was under the mayorship of Rudy Giuliani, in terms of cops given the green light to harass and oppress Blacks and Latinos, but restraint and not even not touching Chinese and Jewish communities. Why is that? Why is that? We go back a couple of decades, even 100 years ago, Chinese and Jewish communities were oppressed as well. Bruce Lee, one of the reasons he left America at the end of the 60s to go to Hong Kong to become this international celebrity was because of anti-Chinese racism. But now the tables have turned. But it's not that they have turned that we have to blame Jewish people, like some black people like to say, oh, now they're white, so they get white privilege. They worked on the community as well, despite all the aid that they got from Western governments. Same as for China. Yes, they worked on themselves since 1972, the Nixon, the Nixon's visit to Mao that helped to start the education of so many Chinese engineers and then to uplift the Chinese community and the Chinese nation. We have to do our part as well. We can't be a community that always points fingers and that always cry victimization. That is a lie.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm just going to go down the road, especially what's going on in Africa.
Yes.
With the, let's call it Chinese imperialism, lack of a better term. Is there an opportunity for Pan-Africanism to be its own steer of its own ship without the two biggest economies in the world being involved, America and the US? Is there a way that can Pan-Africanism sail its own ship instead of having to be part of some American imperialism ship or Chinese imperialism ship?
That is an excellent question, my brother. But okay, let us dare to be frank.
Yeah.
How can we have Africa truly becoming independent, steering its own ship, when we have so many, the majority, maybe even the vast majority of African elites? And here, notice, I'm giving you an Africa from the north to the south. So this is not just Black Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. From the north, starting in Egypt, to the south in South Africa. How can we truly get an Africa that's independent when so many of the elites have been trained in the United States, in Europe, in the Arabic countries?
Good point.
I myself speaking to you here, I'm in Canada.
Good point.
Sure, I'm a Pan-Africanist loud and clear. My fist is raised. My heroes are behind me. I am not pandering to some attention or financial aid from non-Africans per se. I do my job, but I stay authentic and honest. I stay authentic and honest to my speech. So from the very top-down structure, we need to address this Africa that's supposed to rise in Pan-Africanism. But even in terms of the institutions that are there, such as the African Union, one of the things that happened is how, when I was at the United Nations, I submitted 22 recommendations. One of my recommendations addressed the African Union program to develop Africa, notably in terms of the valuing of African people who are marginalized. We still live in a world in which far too many Africans, including our leaders, use white supremacy lenses against Black people. So even in the African Union, there was a recognition, and a very good recognition, of the harm done to girls and women, and complete dismissal of the fate of LGBTQ Africans. Just as in the same way, when we talk about this Africa rising, let's be honest. How is the nation of Israel an observer to the African Union at the same status as Haiti is an observer to the African Union? It's completely illogical, no matter how they try to explain it. Haiti is a light of Pan-Africanism, the first state to become independent out of slavery. Israel has recognized systemic anti-Black racism, where Black Jews complain. And when I say Black Jews, Black Palestinians are victims not only of being Black, of being Muslim, but also of being Palestinians. And we're putting at the African Union the same status of Israel and Haiti. This is not some anti-Israeli speech or anti-Jewish speech. It cannot be. There are black Israelis and there are black Jews. But it's to look at the very organization of our structures and the geopolitical aspect of it. So when we look at from economy to the politics, and even in terms of culture, I mean, it's a slight example. It's going to seem even petty, to be honest. We still live in a world where we have a great song, and I like that song, so nobody will call me a hypocrite here. Burner Boy, you know, the artist Burner Boy, and I'm forgetting the name of the lady. It's actually her. It's actually her track, Jerusalem. We still live in a world in which we can have an African track, African music, African culture that becomes popularized. We're celebrating the ancestors, the ideology of other non-African people. Meanwhile, we cannot imagine whites, Arabs, Chinese making a song about Kinshasa, about Port-au-Prince, about Douala, about Dakar becoming an international hit. It sounds petty, but it's little things like this that help you see the reality of the world that we live in if we talk about our respect and our own value.
Do you, and let's go back to when you attended the United Nations event a few months ago. How did that impact your view of Pan-Africanism attending that event?
I'm going to say, for me, it was really good in terms of already being involved. But I can only imagine for so many of our brothers and sisters who talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. I was very happy to see so many brothers, and especially sisters, because there were more sisters than brothers. Some of them famous, like Assa Traoré of France, who has been protesting police brutality since the police murder of her brother, Adama Traoré, in 2016, if I recall. But also at the political level, such as Minister of Race Relations of Brazil, Arielle Franco, sister of Marielle Franco, murdered by the Bolsonaro regime in 2017, and I had the honor to be the spokesperson of a movement here in Ottawa that honored her. So for me, when you are involved already, it was nice. I was at the right place at the right time with like-minded people. Like-minded does not mean we agree on everything and anything. Like-minded means we recognize that we are in the same fight, the dignity of our people. There were many of us, but we also know in reality, when it comes to our people, we are a minority. We are a growing minority, but we are still a minority. We know very well that in our Black community, if you get the entertainer, the right entertainer especially, there will always be more people at the show, at the event, at the concert, than at the event of Black consciousness. In the same sense as we see this every weekend, whether it's Friday for some, especially Saturday for others, and definitely Sunday, we see the efforts our people do to dress well, to take the time in order to go brainwash themselves to the ideologies of non-Black people. But the same people, the majority of them, the vast majority of them, they're not going to come to the event to uplift the community. It's a state, a mind state, in which far too many basically have succumbed, have admitted the defeat in the authenticity of the Blackness to stand up and say, I'm Black, I'm proud, and I'm beautiful. These are the words of our brother Martin Luther King in 1967. That speech, far less known than the speech of 1963, I Have a Dream. Why is it that 1963 speech, I Have a Dream, is so far more popular versus the one of 1967? a speech about integration versus a speech about Black pride. That's the reality for too many of our people.
If you could give one or two or three suggestions, actually, I'll break it down. Could you give any suggestions to non-melanated individuals when it comes to Pan-Africanism? What would you provide to them?
What I would provide to them is, first of all, I'm going to take a very current and ongoing example. I don't blame Westerners / white people for the support and effort they show for Ukraine. I absolutely do not blame them. I actually think it's good. I blame our people, especially African nations, but as well Caribbean nations, to not do the same for our people in Sudan, for Black migrants in Northern Africa, to not mobilize to rescue them, but not rescue them to have them go to Europe, but to create better conditions in our African nations, for not coming together for Haiti. That's who I blame. It's easy to point fingers, but there are fingers looking back at you. So for non-melanated people, I would dare them to be honest with themselves in regards to their history. You know, too often I give a perfect example that happens with white Americans. When you talk about slavery, they like to avoid the topic in saying some Black person owned slaves in the 17th century, as if that changes anything to the fact of millions of Africans deported and enslaved here. I would dare non-melanated people to address why, for example, affirmative action basically is getting canceled because of privileged Asians. I didn't say Asians because it doesn't imply all Asians. Some privileged Asians who are going, privileged and conservative Asians, I must say, who basically are canceling affirmative action. And when I'm saying that, who were the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action? It wasn't even Black people. It's white women. So where are the white women in support of Black people for affirmative action? The ones who benefited the most. I would also tell non-melanated people to dare be honest with Black people when it comes to the ideologies they propagate to Black people. I still remember in 2018, I gave a conference in a high school here in Ottawa. The teacher, an Arab woman, refused to tell the truth to her class about how Blacks are more commonly called in Arab Muslim culture. She refused. It's a young 17 or 18-year-old Arab student who dared to say it, that it's Abid, which refers to Blacks for slaves. The class, especially the Black students, were shocked. And I asked the teacher, how is it that you, a teacher, you dare not speak the truth to your students, and you have a young student who has the honesty of the speech in terms of the realities of the world that he lives in? So if I would say that, that's what I would tell non-melanated people, to basically address themselves, to basically fight the white privilege, the Arab fragility, the Asian sense of whatever, and the Muslim community with the hypocrisy of saying, slavery, colonization, look at the evil white people, meanwhile dismissing it's with slavery and colonization that Islam spread to Africa, just as Christianity. So that's what I would say.
Okay, we're about a little halfway through, and I just want to say, if people want to get in contact with Cesar, there is his email address, president@rootsandculturecanada.com. Also, we'd just like to remind everyone, if you like what you're hearing and you're seeing, please like the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook and hit the notification button. Also, hit the like button on, hit the like button on YouTube and hit the notification button. Hit the like button on Facebook and LinkedIn. So that's what we're going to go to in our remaining moments. And people may not realize this, but This past week was the 10th anniversary of Black Lives Matters. And interesting, this global thing that happened, and we're 10 years down the road. Cesar, reflection. 10 years since Black Lives Matters. Where were we? Where are we? And where do we need to go?
First and foremost, thank you to the sisters and brothers and everybody who got involved in terms of Black Lives Matter. From the original creators to the organizations in different cities, notably Toronto, to the protests, and I include here non-Black people who basically added to the number, added to the outrage. Yes, we can talk about the pandemic. There was nothing on TV, and as such, people came out, but that would also include a lot of Black people who would not have come out if there was interesting things on TV. So no, thank you to everyone. And as we speak of Black Lives Matter, I always remind these of people. When I speak of Black Lives Matter, I speak about the movement that brought thousands and millions of people to protest against police brutality and racism. I am not speaking about the organization of Black Lives Matter, where some people have found contradictions between the speech and notably financial management. I am speaking solely about the movement. I have nothing to do with the
financial management, etc.
They don't know me and I don't know them. So that's not on my interest. So 10 years later, again, I want to give my sympathies to the family of Trayvon Martin. I want to give my sympathies to the families of Trayvon Martin, from which basically the murder of our young brother. He was 17 in 2012 when he got killed. 11 years later, he will be 28 years old. And yet George Zimmerman is still free. I also give my sympathies to the family of our brother, George Floyd, 2020. Like I said, and this is where we have to notably talk about certain people in our community, such as, and I say her name very carefully, Kundes. Those who understand.
Okay.
In his life, sure, character-wise, George Floyd would not have been my friend. We wouldn't have been chilling together. But he didn't get killed because of his character. He got killed because he's Black, and as such, he's my brother. So 10 years later, my reflection would basically be to talk about the fact that Black Lives Matter has, to me, to my knowledge, has been the biggest mobilizing movement since the 1970s Black Panthers in America. But here it's even bigger because it spread to the world in an age of 24 hours news cycle, but especially of internet and social media. If there wasn't a young sister there, and I apologize, I forget her name, but I remember she was 17 years old, if I recall. If there wasn't a young sister there recording for 9 minutes and a half, George Floyd would have been just another Black man killed by police, and we wouldn't even know his name today. She did her duty above and beyond, because that must have been a traumatizing experience. 10 years later, more consciousness, more mobilization. And I want to say a little cautionary tale to our people. Many of our Black people like to think protesting and walking serve nothing. That's not true. You cannot preach violence as a reaction to injustice when you don't have the weapons of the oppressors. And we do not have them. Whether we talk at a community level, whether we talk at a nation level, there is no nation in Africa that has a nuclear weapon. So
to
yes.
our knowledge.
Oh, the knowledge is there, actually. The knowledge is there. The knowledge, yes. The brackets, one of the conditions, I might be wrong. So I'm just saying this right now for those who would want to challenge me here. I might be wrong, but to my knowledge, one of the conditions to the end of apartheid in 1991 was for South Africa, in terms of South Africa, to be led by the NAC of Nelson Mandela, of Madiba, was to let go of the potential of the nuclear energy with which, notably, you can build nuclear weapons. This is why Africa, there are no nuclear weapons in Africa. There are nuclear weapons in Asia, in Europe, and North America. But when you look at Africa, the Middle East, and South America, there are no nuclear weapons in those parts of the world. So back to what I was saying, it's very important to understand the growth of consciousness that Black Lives Matter has contributed to amid other social movements in bringing to light, for many who like to be in denial, including far too many Black people, the very nature of oppression, and also in terms of being able to bring the contrast in terms of how a Black person, notably a Black man, especially a Black man, let's be honest, being guilty of a crime and thus sentenced for such, versus how another, a white person gets sentenced. I always remember the case of, I forget the name of the Black male, but this white guy broke something. Two similar cases in terms of raping a young woman. A Black man will rape a young woman, a white man will rape a young woman. Very similar situation. The Black man got, I think, 18 to 30 years in jail. Meanwhile, the white guy from good society, etc., got, I think, 6 months of house arrest. So Black Lives Matter has helped beyond justice, but also to organize people and also to have more recognition to our sisters and brothers of the LGBTQ community, just as well as help to bring further the conversation, the talk regarding ideologies of oppression. When we say white supremacy, that's nice, but white supremacy is in all aspects of society, notably when we talk not just about politics and economics, but we talk about culture, aka Oscar So White, but we also talk about, such as example, religion, which I talk about often.
Okay, just want to jump in here. Sophia Jacob and the Ottawa Posse is out today. Sophia Jacob saying, remember Sister Sandra Ban and Breonna Taylor. Hashtag say their names. 10 years BLM. A big fan of yours is here. She's actually right now watching you from, I think she's still in the Northwest Territories. Yellowknife. Michelle Baptiste says, thank you for sharing your impactful insights. She's always asking, when is Cesar coming back on the show? She's always asking. Also want to just say shout out to some people who are broadcasting this segment of the Dr. Vibe show, Black Canada Talking, on Instagram Live. If you want to catch the whole thing, because we're going to be shutting it down soon, go to the Dr. Vibe show on YouTube. Like, subscribe, share, etc.
If I can very quickly add, and it's important
go ahead.
to always remember this. When Sister Sophia Jacob talked about Sandra Bland and Breonna Taylor, so many names to remember. Let us never forget, Black Lives Matter, although it started in the United States of America, is a global phenomenon. And we forget too often the sisters. Regis Korchinski-Paquet in Toronto, Manuel Ferreira da Silva in Brazil. Those are also women, sisters. And even when we talk about Africa, in Nigeria, there were protests against police brutality. A specific, I think, battalion of police called SARS, SARS, where Nigerians protested against police brutality in their own country. Yes, brothers were killed around the world. I gave the example of Adama Traore in France, Solomon Teka in Israel, Black Jew, anti-Black racism in North Africa, such as in Tunisia today, but also Algeria and Morocco, but also in the Middle East, such as Lebanon, Qatar, and the kafala system. But let us not forget the system also kills many of our sisters and women who are also mothers. Please go ahead, Dr. Vibe.
I just want to ask also, were we expecting, were many supporters of Black Lives Matter expecting too much of the movement in too short of a time? Because if you look, and here in Canada, there is an organization, I'm not going to give their name, who had organizations sign a pledge to, combat racism. And if, and now there's the Globe and Mail every year looks at the people who pledge to this, to pledge to the pledge allegiance to the pledge, and they've come woefully short. Have melanated people, or those, let's put it this way, those supporters of Black Lives Matter, have we expected too much too soon and realize it's a journey, not a race, to where we want to get to?
Yes, but the issue is not supporters of Black Lives Matter. Allow me to be very honest. One of the fundamental issues in terms of Black people, dignity, justice, and path to being seen and treated with respect as other communities that have come out of oppression is the fact that the vast majority of us are adamant believers of integration. They are not believers of standing up for the cause. When our brother Martin Luther King was talking about wondering if he brought his people in a house on fire, the issue is not even so much integration per se, in the ideological differences with brother Malcolm X in terms of separatism versus integration. No, Black people cannot just live on an island or in a single state in the United States and call it the Black state. No, that's not it. But you can have integration with Black consciousness. The problem is too many of our people believing in integration at all costs and any cost. And I give a perfect example that too many of our people know. We have far too many rappers who rap about police brutality, police killing, and white people being racist and everything. What usually happens when they get to some fame and fortune? Where do they move to? There you go. They're not getting fame and fortune and saying, now that I made it, let me uplift the hood. Let me be inspired by Fred Hampton. Let me be inspired by Ida B. Wells. Let me take example on this brother or this sister who did it. Tulsa. Black, how do you call it? Black Wall Street. No, that's not what's inspiring them. Too many of our people, the notion of fame and fortune is to move to the white neighborhood. It's no accident that we see too many of our entertainers, athletes, celebrities, musicians marrying white women, marrying non-Black women. I'm not against interracial relationships. My own wife is mixed. But there is a fundamental problem, as she would say herself, when we have a community of people that the association of fame and fortune is in a trophy wife who doesn't look like the mother, who doesn't look like the sister. These are consequences of integration, as we were warned over 60 years ago by notably Frantz Fanon in writing Black Skin, White Mask, in writing The Wretched of the Earth. These are the realities. So the expectations regarding Black Lives Matter, were they too high? I don't think it's that they were too high. But I have to be honest in my critical analysis of our own people. We should never be making so much expectations and demands upon the powers that be for them to release, to relinquish some of the power to benefit us. We should be putting the burden upon us to stand up and to keep rising and to remain vigilant. This is where the issue comes from. When I delivered the keynote speech in 2020, June, for the Ottawa Black Lives Matter, I was impressed at the number of white and non-Black people who were present. I was impressed. I said, thank you to all these people. Thank you. You came and you showed up to bring the numbers to 10,000 people, maybe more, maybe a little less. Great. But my question is, who are the first people targeted by systemic racism? We are here in Canada where indigenous communities, not just that they're getting billions, they're going back to the spirituality. They're reconstructing the notion of indigenous justice. They're reappropriating child welfare to address their own families, communities, and children. Our Black people are not doing that. And yet we still continue to face serious systemic racism. Yet we still continue to lack true support to our own. We still continue to have the people who talk the talk, but then turn on the community to give the handshake to the same people they were talking as the enemy. We still continue to have Black people who talk the talk, but at any moment will create further division between Black men and Black women, between light skin and dark skin, between Africans and Caribbeans. This is a fundamental problem. Ultimately, FUBU, for us by us. For us by us. It's beyond Trudeau, it's beyond Biden or Trump, it's beyond Macron in France, it's beyond the fact that right now in England, it's not a white man who was the prime minister. It's an Indian descent. Rishi
Yes, it's true.
He hasn't become more woke because he's not white. He's applying the policies of his same, basically, white supremacist government.
Okay. We're right up against time, so I want to hold you right there because I know you could go further. I think it's something we need to continue on conversation-wise. As always, well, a few last comments. Sophia Jacob says, good point. You mentioned the people, some people, they do not stay in the communities they came out of. Also, too, I think you referenced certain people that are public figures, and a commentator that I follow says would call these people public puppets.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And, Brother Malcolm X said it very well in terms of be careful of those so-called Black leaders who get so much spotlight from the same white oppressive systems they claim to talk against. And here, I have to be careful in making sure that I'm well understood. It is not about considering or saying Trudeau is a white supremacist. No, I don't believe he's a white supremacist. But whether it's Trudeau or Biden, and yes, people have said things in the past and etc. And you will find on one side things like I was seeing today, Mike Tyson talking about how Donald Trump always treated him well, and yet Donald Trump has a long history of anti-Black racism beyond the exonerated five. Ultimately, people tend to act and behave according to the culture, the time and space in which they are born in, especially if they are privileged or advantaged by that system. There is a burden upon those who are oppressed to stay vigilant, to mobilize. This is what our brothers in the 50s and 60s did. This is what our sisters in the 50s and 60s did. The last anti-colonial war in Africa, end of 19th century, beginning of 20th century, was led by a Black woman, Ya Asantewa, in Ghana, the Ashanti, over the golden stool. How many of our sisters know her name? How many of our so-called Black feminists talk about her? And yet they all talk about the Kardashians. They all talk about Lizzo. They all talk about whoever Black pastor or Black female pastor or whatever you want to call it. That is
they even talk about Megan Thee Stallion, Cardi B, and Janelle Monáe.
That's what I mean. So nothing wrong about those sisters. I'm not against them. Put Lizzo in front of me. Put Janelle Monáe in front of me. I would tell them the same thing. And even when we talk about our sister of entanglements, aka Jada Pinkett Smith, she grew back up in my esteem with that Cleopatra documentary. We need to see more of that. We need to see more of that to raise the consciousness, raise the pride, but also the mobilization of our people.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there, or your family's going to get mad at me. So I'm going to stop you right there. So as always, Cesar, thank you for taking the time to share with us. If people want to get in contact with Cesar, and he's going to be on more often, family permitting, you can email him at president@rootsandculturecanada.com. Cesar, as always, take care. All the best to you and your family, and we'll talk.
Thank you. And if I may, just one last thing, Dr. Vibe, I'd like to thank you. As in our conversation of last week, I've shared to some of my international friends who are activists worldwide. I will be coming on the show, and even for a 5-minute segment, allow some of our brothers and sisters, and sometimes they're not Black, to be on the show and to be able to bring up something that basically speak to the realities of Black people wherever they are in the world. So thank you so much, Dr. Vibe.
Remember to give yourself grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Take care. All right. One thing I don't like getting families mad at me, so that's why I had to kick Cesar off, because I don't want to be a family wrecker. We're going to shut it down on Instagram Live. Dr. LJ Speaks. I know I'm bad. You need to hit me on my shiny head. We need to get in touch with each other. It will happen this week. Shutting it down on Instagram. As always, Instagram. If you didn't catch the whole conversation or want to catch the full conversation, go to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube. Like, notify, support, share. Remember to give yourself grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. There we go on Instagram Live. And let's go back to the rest of the family here on the main channel. So as always, remember to like the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and hit the notification button. Also, like the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook and LinkedIn. Also, to advertise your business or service on the show, cut in contact with me, dr.vibe at the drvibeshow.com. If you want to get in touch with me, there's a whole bunch of ways. Website, the drvibeshow.com. Email, you've got already. YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, The Dr. Vibe Show. Twitter, at drvibeshow. Instagram, at the drvibeshow. I'm wondering if I'm going to get into the world of threads. I'm not sure yet. But let's go to one more thing. If you want to catch replays of this epic conversation, they're the places. The Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and the Dr. Vibe Show website. That's it. Tight show today. Cesar brought the heat as per usual. So, as always, I close off with this. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Remember to give yourselves grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. I'd like to say thank you for everyone, your continuous support on YouTube, especially. Get more and more subscribers. We appreciate it and don't take it for granted. And get in touch with me if there's people you want to see on the platform. We want to shine the light on them. God bless. Peace. Well, keep the faith and walk good. Yeah. Listen.